So good evening again, and I hope you had a chance to do some of those exercises last week. And there was a little recap in there about telling your partner some of the things that they're really good at, and then the things that you need to work on yourself. Okay, so that was on page 78. It's a good little exercise to do if you get a chance while you're waiting. But what we want to talk about tonight is the impact of family, and perhaps more importantly, the impact of culture on our own relationships. And I think there are two aspects to this. So one part looks at the way that our family culture has affected us, and the other part looks at the way that our relationships with our extended family continue to impact us. So many people of our generation, grew up in very difficult homes. There were a lot of broken families and divorces, and I think that had a big impact on the way that we grew up through, the 60s and the 70s. However, we were very lucky, as Daniela and I both had very good families. Our parents stayed together through many long years of struggles sometimes and difficulties, and they kept it together, and I really appreciate that about them. So that, I think, gave us a good foundation when we came in, because we could see that example from them as to what they were able to accomplish. However, they were very different families in terms of how we were brought up. So first of all, there was the different cultures coming from Australia. I grew up in the country, and we had a very rural kind of lifestyle, and we would, run around in the fields barefoot and come in very dirty and sometimes a bit smelly, and we didn't really care about those things so much. So my wife, on the other hand, had a very cultured upbringing in a city environment, right? And so that inevitably led to some misunderstandings and adjustments on the part of each of us in order to kind of come together as a couple. So there were also different, I think, aspects in the way that our families were structured. Like, for example, my mother was really the person in charge in the family. She was the one who set the rules and got all the kids together and on schedule, so there were 6 kids, and it was quite a task to keep everybody organized and make sure that we all had clothes and food and that kind of thing. But she also took care of the finances, and she managed the budget. And my father was very much in the background. My mother was the disciplinarian, and my father was he was the good cop, and she was the bad cop, right? So that's kind of the way it worked in our family. So as you come together as a couple and you start working on your relationship, you have to kind of work these things out, and you can't just automatically assume that because that's the way it was done in my family, then that's the way it should be done in your family. Okay. Do you want to add something?
First of all, I disagree with the statement
Uh-huh.
about growing up with broken families around. When I was growing up in the 60s, I knew only one person who had parents who divorced. All my friends, everybody I knew, had families that stayed together. Divorce was not rampant, and people just stayed together. So for us, it was an anomaly to have to see children that were coming from broken families. This happened later on, not certainly while you and I were growing up.
Mm.
But definitely the cultural aspect of how we were raised by our parents was different. In Italy, women tend to be treated like princesses, even from my own father, my brothers. If my mother and I would go somewhere, they would open the doors for us, they would let us through, and my husband would push me on the side so that he could go first. So there was a little bit of an adjustment there that had to be done when we got together, and I was more mesmerized than not. But we had to really work things out and understanding what was important. One of the things that I did realize at the beginning of our relationship is that Roger did not have a good relationship with his mother. And one of the reasons was that his mother was vehemently opposed to our church. She had actually had toured Australia um, to basically
Speak against
speak
the
against the church. She's always been very Catholic and did not like what Roger had chosen and often made fun of him in front of all the relatives. And I realized that my husband had a very broken heart when he came to the relationship with his mother. So I set out as a mission to help his heart heal. So I would write to my mother-in-law all the time, uh, writing to her regularly. Sometimes I would talk to her about church things that we were doing, and she would kindly reply, "You can tell me everything, but do not talk about the church." And that was fine. I still kept the relationship. And even though, we would visit them every couple of years, I always sent them tons of pictures. And she would always say, through these pictures, I've seen my grandchildren grow. And it was important for me because it is my understanding that actually, whatever we have unresolved with our parents, we bring into the relationship between husband and wife. And so it was really, really, really very important that his heart would heal and that his mother would also come and see us as a couple. And we have established a beautiful relationship. I call her mom and dad. Your father loved me from day one.
Mm.
Her mother would often, make fun of me because when we would go to picnic and I had my nice skirt and all the ants would come over, I would just go like that everywhere. And when we got our first dog, my mother-in-law said, "I'm so proud of you, Daniela. I never thought that you would get a pet in your house." So I really won her heart. And by doing that, I actually won your heart too, right? Because that
Mhm.
I could really feel that your heart healed
Yes.
towards your mother, and it became so much closeness. There still is a
Mm.
lot of closeness because of that, right?
Yes. And I think it's really important to establish those good relationships with your in-laws. Sometimes they can be challenging, but it's really important that you agree and you kind of figure out how to negotiate, where you're going for Thanksgiving, whose place, who's getting to cook the turkey this year, all of those things, so that the families feel included in you and don't feel excluded in your relationship. Some of you may live with your in-laws, and that can be challenging as well. Especially having two women trying to take control of the same kitchen is always a challenge. If you have that
Necessarily.
experience, yeah, yes, it is.
Not necessarily.
Anyway, so anyway, tonight we want you to dig into this. There may be some painful memories as part of this program as well. Some things that happened in your past that may come up that you need to resolve, and you need to dig into those conversations and what your feelings are about them now. But in any case, it's really important to deal with those things because they can affect your own relationship and the way that you deal with your own spouse. Okay, so let's begin the recording, the playback here. So, welcome back again. Thank you for joining us for this program. I hope you had some good discussions there about your different backgrounds and the impact of family. I was thinking about this idea of forgiving our parents for whatever hurt or pain they may have caused us. And I think the most important thing is that after you've forgiven, that you actually move on from that and you kind of take ownership, you take responsibility, and don't dwell on it. Don't let it be a recurring theme in your life, right? So, there may be things in my past that my parents did that they were not even aware of that affected me in some way. They don't remember them probably, especially as they get older, they don't remember it. And as I get older, I forget about it as well. That's one of the nice things about getting old is you forget all this stuff that happened when you were young. But then you transition from being, the result of the problem of what your parents caused to being the cause of the problem to your own children anyway, so I'm kind of at that phase now that in my life where, my kids are blaming me for all the problems that I caused them. So it all comes around in the end, so don't dwell.
I exaggerate.
I'm exaggerating. Yeah, what? You don't think I caused them? Okay, anyway. So, anyway, thank you very much for joining us. I don't have a lot to add to tonight's session. Take some time to plan your date for the coming week. And yes, spend some time. Give your parents a call and thank them for the wonderful things they did for you, bringing you up. That would be nice. Yes. All right. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Have a good week.